He had everything: cars, mansions, power, but he lacked what nourishes human beings most: compassion. Until the day he discovered something hidden in his own house, something that would make the richest man in the world feel like the poorest of all. One night, he saw her, his maid, kneeling on the kitchen floor, discreetly placing leftovers on a plate. And then, from the darkness, a girl appeared, small, hungry, and happy just to have something to eat. What he did next would change everything. He confronted her angrily, ready to fire them both. But what the girl said before leaving, just one sentence, was the hardest blow his pride had ever suffered. A phrase capable of breaking the heart, even of a billionaire. This is the story of how a simple act of love can transform even the coldest heart.
The sun rose over the mirrored windows of the Moore mansion, reflecting an almost metallic coldness. Alexander Moore, at 42, had already achieved everything a man could desire, except peace. His hotel empire stretched across 3 continents, but the emptiness within him seemed to grow with each new contract signed. The house, immaculate, was an exact portrait of its owner, silent, rigid, and incapable of welcoming any kind of affection. The clock struck 6 in the morning when Alexander finished his black coffee, served by a maid who avoided even breathing near him. No sound was allowed apart from the discreet clinking of the porcelain. He read reports with cold eyes, while the world outside awoke in colors and sounds that did not affect him. In his universe, emotion was synonymous with weakness, and kindness a dangerous distraction. His office, decorated in shades of black and gray, reflected his spirit. An old portrait of his father, a stern and poor man, reminded him every day of the oath he had made as a boy. He would never go hungry again, never be humiliated again. Since then, love had become a luxury he refused to buy. He believed that feeling was a trap, and he would never be vulnerable again. While checking his finances on his tablet, Alexander ignored the distant sound of laughter coming from the garden, gardeners chatting amongst themselves. The lightheartedness of those voices irritated him. They get paid to work, not to laugh, he thought. The simple act of someone showing joy seemed an affront to the discipline he imposed on his own life. The days repeated themselves like identical copies. He woke up, worked, ate dinner alone, and slept with silence as his only company. There was no family, friends, or lovers. Only goals, investments, and the constant feeling that something was chasing him. A hunger that didn't come from his stomach, but from his soul. At night, he wandered aimlessly through the mansion's corridors. The sound of his footsteps echoed off the white walls. Sometimes he would stop by the main window and observe the city lights. There were thousands of people, with their small joys and sorrows. He envied them, without admitting it. Once, looking at his own reflection in the glass, Alexander had the impression of seeing not a successful man, but a well-dressed shadow. A shadow with bills paid, but with a heart in debt. He looked away, denying the unease that was growing in his chest. Deep down, something inside him knew that more than just companionship was missing, humanity was missing. But admitting that would mean betraying everything he had built. So he silenced his conscience, immersing himself in work until exhaustion overcame him. In his enormous room, with its cold walls, he fell asleep, surrounded by luxury and solitude. The pillow was soft, but his sleep was light. And while he slept, Destiny silently began to plot the encounter that would change his life forever.
Before we continue, tell me one thing. Do you believe that money can truly buy happiness? If this story has already made you think, then subscribe to the channel now, because here, each story will remind you of what the world is forgetting, the value of the human heart. On the other side of town, in a small, one-room apartment, Clara would wake before sunrise. The alarm clock had barely rung when she was already up, apron in hand, her gaze determined. Life had never given her a break, but it had given her something Alexander had never known: purpose. Beside her, her daughter. The 6-year-old was still asleep, hugging a teddy bear that was missing an eye. Clara kissed the girl's forehead and whispered, "Today is going to be a good day, my love." But deep down, she knew it would be another tiring day, in which she would have to hide Leah in the mansion's basement while she worked. It wasn't ideal, but it was the only way to avoid leaving her daughter alone. Upon arriving at the mansion, Clara entered through the service entrance and smiled at the security guard, who rarely smiled back. Leah followed her, hidden under a blanket in an old, lovingly adapted transport box. Inside there was a sandwich and a small book, her only companions during the day. Clara worked quickly and silently. She dried each glass, polished each surface as if the shine of things could reflect dignity. She was grateful for her job, even though her boss never looked her in the eye. She knew that in life, respect didn't always come with a salary. At midday, when the smell of lunch filled the kitchen, Clara thought of Leah. She imagined the girl's curious little face, waiting to hear the sound of her mother's footsteps. When she could, she took some of the leftovers, not out of dishonesty, but out of necessity. For Leah, those leftovers were feasts. While cleaning the main room, Clara looked at a huge portrait of Alexander. "Such a serious man must be very sad," she murmured. The other maid, Maria, replied softly, "He is. No amount of money can buy peace." They both laughed, complicit in their sorrows. In the afternoon, Clara went down to the basement to check on Leah. She found the girl drawing on the cement floor with a small pencil. Leah looked at her mother and asked, "Mommy, is the boss mean?" Clara smiled sweetly. "No, my love. He just forgot what love is." Those words, spoken with innocence and faith, seemed like a premonition. Leah hugged her mother and whispered, "I want to feed him someday, just like you do for me." Clara laughed and promised, "Someday you will be able to, my dear, someday." Meanwhile, upstairs, Alexander was reviewing the security camera footage board, searching for something to break the routine. He didn't know it, but he was about to find the spark that would ignite the cold walls of his own heart. The morning began with haste and anxiety. Clara woke up late for the first time in months. The previous night's rain had flooded part of the street and delayed transportation. With Leah clinging to her neck, she ran to the bus stop, praying that her boss wouldn't notice her absence of a few minutes. On the way, the sleepy girl whispered, "Mommy, you're always on time. Today will be fine too." Arriving at the mansion, Clara entered through the back door, soaked, her heart racing. He quickly hid Leah in the small basement of the service area, but barely had time to compose himself. The cook was already calling her to help with the boss's lunch, who, exceptionally, had decided to work from home that day. Something rare and dangerous for someone who wanted to go unnoticed. As Clara polished the glasses and set the table, she felt sweat trickling down her back. Each of Alexander's steps echoed like thunder. The girl, down below, remained quiet, obedient, playing with her teddy bear. But fate, capricious as it is, likes to test even the most careful. In the middle of the afternoon, when Clara went upstairs to get clothes from the master bedroom, she heard hurried footsteps. It was the gardener, pale, bringing news. "Mrs. Clara, I saw a child in the basement. Is it your daughter?" Panic overwhelmed her.
She begged, almost pleading, that he not say anything, promising to explain later. But the seed of dishonesty had already been sown. Alexander, in his office, was watching the security cameras as usual. A strange movement caught his attention. Clara, opening the refrigerator and placing something in a small container. He frowned. The scene seemed innocent, but in his cold gaze, it was an affront. From that moment on, his eyes were fixed on the screen. He fast-forwarded the video, watching Clara hide the lunchbox inside a cloth bag. The billionaire felt his blood boil. "Stealing food?" he muttered through his teeth. Indignation wounded his pride more than any material value. The clock showed almost 10 o'clock at night when Clara went down to the basement again, carrying the lunchbox. Alexander watched every second of the recording. When the lid opened and he saw the girl eating with a smile, something inside him, still unconscious, wavered, but his fury was still greater. Unaware she was being watched, Clara stroked her daughter's hair and said, "One day, you will have a better life, my love. I swear you will." Alexander paused the video at that exact moment. His face hardened, feeling a strange pang in his chest. "Dishonesty disguised as love," he told himself. But the phrase sounded false, empty. Still, he decided, the next day she would be confronted, and perhaps fired. The rain started again outside, fine and steady. It was as if the sky itself knew that something important was about to break. Not just a secret, but the wall between two worlds. The following dawn was fraught with tension. Alexander woke earlier than usual, with a strange feeling in his chest. He dressed silently, went downstairs to the living room, and waited. The clock struck 7 a.m. when Clara arrived, punctual, trying to hide her nervousness. Leah was still asleep in the basement, oblivious to the storm about to break. "Clara," he called, his voice firm and cold, "I need to talk to you after breakfast." His tone left no room for escape. She simply nodded, her stomach clenching. She spent the morning like a ghost, avoiding his gaze. Every spoonful, every step seemed to foretell disaster. At noon, when lunch was served, Alexander waited for everyone to leave the room. Then he looked up and said, "I've found something interesting on the cameras." Clara felt the blood drain from her face. She tried to explain, but he raised his hand, cutting her. "I don't want excuses. I saw everything." Clara tried to breathe, but the words came out broken. "Sir, I didn't mean to steal. They were leftovers. I just wanted my daughter not to go to bed hungry." Alexander clenched his fists. "Leftovers or not, it's my property. You lied." His voice echoed like a sentence. Leah, hearing the screams in the basement, slowly descended the stairs. Seeing her mother crying, she ran to her. Alexander, surprised, took a step back. The girl looked at him with big, innocent eyes. "I'm sorry, sir. It was my fault. I was hungry." That sentence, simple, sincere, devastating, pierced the silence like an arrow. The air seemed thicker, and Alexander felt something collapse inside him. The image of a hungry boy, many years ago, begging for bread and receiving scorn. Clara hugged her daughter and pleaded, "Please don't send us away. I promise, never again." But Alexander didn't answer. He simply turned and walked towards the stairs. On the last step, he said in a cold voice, "You have 1 hour to leave." Clara's heart broke silently. Leah, not understanding, held her mother's hand and whispered, "Mommy, is he angry because he hasn't eaten yet?" The girl's innocence was cruelly pure. As they were about to leave, Leah looked back and said sweetly, "Thank you, Uncle, for yesterday's meal. It was the most delicious dinner of my life." Alexander, standing on the stairs, remained motionless. That sweet and true phrase pierced his pride like an invisible blade. Clara left in tears. Alexander was left alone, surrounded by expensive dishes and silence. For the first time in a long time, the taste of victory seemed bitter to him. The sound of the door slamming shut behind Clara echoed like thunder in the heart of the mansion. Alexander remained motionless for a long time, staring into space. He felt anger, but he didn't know exactly at whom. At her, at the child, or at himself. Every word he had heard repeated itself in his mind like an unsettling refrain. It was the most delicious dinner of my life. Why had that phrase affected him so much?
He went to the kitchen, where there were still remnants of the lunch that had been served. The heavy, full pots seemed to mock him. A man who could feed 100 families, yet who had taken offense at a plate of leftovers. He ran his hand over the clean table and felt a shiver of guilt, a feeling he hadn't felt in years. In the office, he tried to distract himself with numbers, contracts, and graphs. Nothing worked. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the girl's face, her big, sincere eyes. He remembered his own childhood, when he would ask for bread at the bakery and be chased away by the owner. The same look he saw in Leah, the look of someone who only wants a little kindness. But Alexander wasn't ready to admit what he felt. He called the house manager and ordered, "Discard all uneaten food, nothing should leave here, and hire someone new tomorrow." His voice was cold, but trembled slightly. The man hung up, confused. As night fell, the silence weighed more heavily than ever. Alexander poured himself some wine, but it tasted sour. He walked to the large mirror in the hallway and looked at himself. A man in an impeccable suit, a rigid face, but tired eyes. "You did the right thing," he told himself. "Order is order." However, the words sounded hollow. He remembered Clara's expression, not anger, but fear and pain. It bothered him more than he cared to admit. "Why do I care?" he muttered irritably, throwing the glass against the wall. The sound of the glass breaking was liberating and painful at the same time. That night, sleep wouldn't come. The hours dragged on, and the silence of the mansion seemed to mock him. He remembered the day his mother, still young, had shared the last piece of bread with him. A simple gesture, but full of love. He had never felt anything so pure again. Outside, the rain began to fall. Alexander watched through the window as the drops trickled down like trapped tears. For the first time in many years, he felt small and hungry. Not for food, but for something he couldn't even name. When the clock struck midnight, he whispered something that surprised him. "I was wrong." It was only 3 words, but they weighed like lead. For the first time, the man who controlled the world realized he didn't control his own heart. The following morning dawned gray. Alexander went down for breakfast without any appetite. The new maid, nervous, served him in silence. Everything seemed normal, but the taste of regret was still there, stronger than the coffee. The empty chair that Clara usually occupied by the sink seemed to scream her absence. He tried to work, but his mind refused. Every time he typed an email, he remembered the girl's gaze, sweet, pure, grateful. Why on earth did she thank me? He thought. This tormented him more than any business failure. A thank you he didn't deserve, but which now defined him.
Late in the morning, the gardener, the same one who had warned Clara the day before, knocked on the office door. "Mr. Moore, excuse me for bothering you, but the young woman you sent away, she was a good person. She looked after us, you know. She shared her lunch when there was any left over." Alexander looked at him silently, surprised. She shared it? He repeated. Yes, sir. She used to say that real food is the kind that feeds others. The gardener said goodbye and left, leaving Alexander paralyzed. His pride began to crumble completely. The words echoed in his mind. Real food is the food that satisfies the hunger of others. Without thinking, Alexander got in his car and drove aimlessly. The streets automatically led him back to the suburbs he had come from. The simple houses, the children playing barefoot, the smell of fresh bread coming from the bakeries. Everything seemed like a portrait of a past he pretended to have forgotten. He parked the car and stared. Memories came rushing back like a whirlwind. His impoverished childhood, his mother working in 2 houses, his empty stomach, and the silent promise that one day he would never again need to ask anyone for anything. He kept his promise, but paid too high a price for it. Back at the mansion that night, Alexander walked to the kitchen. He opened the refrigerator, saw full plates, untouched leftovers, wasted food. "How much love did I throw away without realizing it?" he murmured. The answer came in the silence. He climbed the stairs slowly and sat on the bed. For the first time in decades, she felt like crying. Not tears of anger, but of redemption. The weight she carried in her chest wasn't just guilt, it was the recognition of her own humanity for hunger. Outside, the rain began to fall again, light and steady. And for the first time, Alexander wished he were somewhere else, not in a luxurious hotel, not at a $1,000,000 meeting, but standing before that simple door asking forgiveness from a woman who had shown him what love was. And as the thunder roared in the distance, he promised himself the next day he would meet Clara and Leah, and this time it wouldn't be the boss speaking, it would be the man who had finally learned to feel. Dawn found Alexander already awake, seated in his office armchair. Before him, an untouched cup of coffee slowly cooled. He had spent the entire night sifting through memories, the hungry boy, the exhausted mother, the bread silently shared. The image of Clara and Leah mingled with the memories, as if the past and present conspired to make him feel again.
Guilt weighed like lead, but alongside it was something new. Willpower. A will to correct, to understand, to look into each other's eyes without superiority. Maybe there's still time, he murmured to himself. For the first time in years, Alexander felt small and, paradoxically, human. He took the car without telling anyone. He drove to the poor neighborhood where he knew Clara lived. The narrow streets, full of children playing, brought a lump to his throat. In each simple smile, he saw a happiness that money could never buy. The sound of laughter echoed in his chest, tearing through the silence that had accompanied him for so long. Stopping in front of a small wooden house, he hesitated. The rusty gate, the peeling paint, the smell of bread and soap, everything there screamed life. He rang the doorbell with a trembling hand, as if each second of waiting were a trial. Clara opened the door with a look of astonishment. The shock was immediate. She hadn't expected to see him there, in a suit, under the morning sun. Before she could speak, he took off his hat and said in a low, firm voice, "I came to apologize." Simple words, but laden with weight. Clara remained silent for a few seconds. Her eyes welled up, but she maintained her dignity. "Apologies don't nourish, sir," she replied calmly. Alexander nodded, accepting the truth. "But perhaps they can begin to heal," he said with a sincere look. Leah appeared behind her mother, holding the patched-up teddy bear. When she saw him, she ran to Alexander, hugging his legs. "Uncle with the sad smile," she cried, smiling. He knelt down, unable to hold back his tears. "I came to see you, little one." Clara watched the scene with a heavy heart. That image, her daughter embracing a man who had once driven them away, was the purest portrait of forgiveness. Alexander looked at her and said, "I want to understand and help if you still allow me." There was a profound silence. Clara took a deep breath and replied, "If you want to help, sit down. Lunch is simple but made with love." Alexander smiled without irony for the first time. And in that small invitation, he understood. True love is served on humble plates, but it nourishes even the emptiest souls. While they ate, the billionaire felt something he hadn't experienced in decades: peace. And he realized with humility that perhaps Clara's poverty wasn't misery, but freedom. Lunch was simple: rice, beans, and stewed chicken. Alexander could barely eat, not out of disgust, but out of emotion. Each bite brought back childhood memories and the forgotten taste of food made with love. Clara watched him in silence, trying to understand what this hardened man was truly seeking there. "Why did you come, sir?" she asked, her voice serene. Alexander hesitated before answering. "Because I saw something in you that reminded me of what I've lost. I saw love where I only saw obligation. I saw dignity where I only saw subservience." Clara lowered her gaze, feeling tears threatening to fall.
He continued, "I didn't bring money. I brought something I've never given to anyone: respect." Those words, coming from a man who symbolized power, were worth more than any fortune. Clara took a deep breath and replied, "Respect is what nourishes the heart most, Mr. Moore." At that moment, Leah interrupted the conversation, placing a drawing before him. On the colored paper were drawn 3 little figures: a woman, a girl, and a man in a suit, holding hands. "That's us," she said, laughing. Alexander felt his chest warm. Something was melting inside him. "Did you draw your uncle?" he asked, surprised. "Yes, because uncle isn't bad. He just forgot how to smile." Clara looked at her daughter, moved. The silence that followed was charged with something greater than words: a silent forgiveness, a timid new beginning. Alexander looked around. The simple walls, the old photos, the smell of fresh coffee, everything in that humble home radiated a kind of wealth he had never possessed. "May I ask why you never told me about Leah?" he asked. Clara replied calmly, "Because the rich don't listen to the poor, sir. And I am tired of shouting to those who never wanted to listen." The phrase hit him hard. He nodded, defenseless. "You're right. I've lived surrounded by voices, but I've never listened to any." Then he took the expensive watch off his wrist and placed it on the table. "This watch is worth what I earned in a month, but it never gave me back the time I wasted. Now I want to use it for something worthwhile." Clara tried to refuse, but he insisted. "It's not charity. It's gratitude." Leah took the watch and put it back on his wrist. "Time is yours, uncle. You just need to use it to smile." The purity of the childlike words was like a divine embrace. Alexander promised he would return the next day. As he left the house, he felt the air was different. The world seemed lighter, the sky more alive. For the first time, the man who had everything left a place with nothing to take, but feeling complete. As the car drove away, Clara looked out the window and whispered, "Perhaps God still knows how to transform hearts of stone." And deep down, she knew that something much greater was just beginning. In the days that followed the visit, Alexander couldn't return to his old routine. The meeting seemed empty, the reports meaningless. While the directors talked about profits and expansions, his mind kept returning to that small wooden table, the smell of beans, and Leah's laughter. He had discovered what money could never buy, the feeling of belonging. One Sunday morning, he decided to investigate Clara further. He asked his assistant for information, but demanded discretion. When the papers arrived, he was surprised. She had worked in 3 houses before his, always with impeccable references. Furthermore, part of her salary was donated monthly to an institution that fed needy children.
Alexander felt a tightening in his chest. That woman, whom he had considered a thief, fed others despite having so little. And I, with so much, have never fed anyone but my own ego, he murmured. The words came out heavy, bitter, but liberating. Driven by curiosity and regret, he went to the institution mentioned in the documents, a small community center with colorful walls and laughter echoing through the courtyard. There, a kind lady recognized him. "Ah, you must be Clara's boss. She speaks very highly of you." Alexander fell silent. Shame paralyzed him. "She always helps. When she doesn't have money, she brings food. She says that the abundance left over in her boss's house can be a miracle for those who are hungry," the woman said. The words pierced his heart. Alexander took a deep breath and simply replied, "She's richer than I am." That night, he returned home and looked around. Every detail of the mansion seemed like a reminder of his own blindness. He opened the safe where he kept his jewelry and watches and stared at it all. How many smiles could fit in here? He asked his reflection in the polished metal. He made up his mind and made a list. He would sell some of his possessions, and the money would go to social projects. But first, he needed to mend what he had broken with Clara and Leah. The next day, he appeared at their door again. No suit, no bodyguards, no air of superiority, just a man with a naked heart. "Clara, I need you to let me do something right this time," he said, holding an envelope. She hesitated, suspicious. "I don't want your money, sir." He smiled tenderly. "It's not money. It's an invitation." When she opened the envelope, she saw the Moore Foundation letterhead. Below the name, a handwritten phrase, "Project Food for the Soul. Coordinator, Clara Alves." For a moment, time stood still. Clara stared at him, stunned. Alexander took a deep breath and said, "I don't want to pay for forgiveness. I want you to teach me how to deserve it." Clara took a few days to accept the invitation. The offer was too big, and the fear of being humiliated again still lingered in her heart. But Leah, hopeful, said every day, "Mom, the uncle with the sad smile is getting better." Her daughter's innocent faith was the push she needed. On the appointed day, Clara and Leah arrived at the mansion, no longer as a maid and a hidden daughter, but as guests. The gate opened slowly, and the house, once cold and silent, now seemed different. The scent of the newly planted flowers in the garden revealed that something had changed.
Alexander was waiting for them at the door, simply dressed, holding a bouquet of sunflowers. "Welcome to your new home," he said with a shy smile. Clara stood motionless for a second, unsure if she believed him. Leah ran to him, laughing, and hugged him as if that hug could erase the past. During dinner, Alexander made a point of sitting next to them. The table, once a symbol of distance, became a meeting point. He first helped himself to something he had never done before: humility. "Clara," he said, raising his gaze, "you taught me something I never learned from all the books and business in the world: the value of what is enough." Clara replied sweetly,
And you taught me that even a heart of stone can learn to love if it is warmed by the truth. The silence that followed was light, as if the air had been purified. Leah clapped her hands, happy with the atmosphere of reconciliation. After dinner, Alexander led them to a small room. On the table were documents. I want you to manage the Food for the Soul project. It will be a program to combat food waste and help needy families. And I want you to start the right way, your way. Clara read each line, tears welling in her eyes. Do you trust me with this? He smiled. I don't trust anyone else. For the first time, Clara felt seen, not as a servant, but as someone of real value. Curious, Leah climbed onto Alexander's lap and asked, Uncle, can I draw a nice name for the project? He laughed. Yes, you can. The girl wrote with colored pencils, Food Made with Love. Alexander looked and said, Perfect. That's the real name. The night ended with laughter, stories, and an unprecedented lightness in that house. When the two left, Alexander watched the car drive away, his heart full and his eyes brimming with tears. At that moment, he realized that the house finally had what money could never buy: human warmth. And for the first time, the billionaire who had everything truly felt at home. The news quickly picked up on it. Billionaire creates hunger relief project with former domestic worker. The headline spread like wildfire, and Alexander's corporate world reacted with disdain. In meetings, the looks were of veiled disapproval. Executives whispered, partners sent emails, concerned about his image. On a sweltering afternoon, one of the most senior directors confronted him in the meeting room. With all due respect, Mr. Moore, this is a mistake. You're mixing charity with business. It will tarnish your reputation. He stared at him in silence for a few seconds. Then he replied calmly, I'd rather tarnish my reputation than my conscience. The silence that followed was heavy. One by one, the directors looked away, unable to retort. Alexander knew he was distancing himself from the circle he once revered, but he didn't care. For the first time, he felt free from conforming to a standard that only left him feeling empty.
Meanwhile, Clara worked tirelessly on the project. He organized volunteers, collected donations, and within a few weeks had already distributed hundreds of meals. The community rallied, and Alexander's name began to be associated not with the coldness of business, but with humanity. One morning, he visited the center where the project operated. People greeted him with genuine gratitude, something he had never experienced in luxury salons. Seeing children eating and smiling, he felt tears welling up. That's how the change began, he thought, looking at Clara, who coordinated everything with serenity and sweetness. But the peace was short-lived. One of her managers, driven by envy, spread rumors that Clara was embezzling project funds. The accusations quickly reached the press. When the news broke, Alexander was at a business conference. Chaos ensued. The journalists surrounded him. Mr. Moore, is it true that your protege is involved in fraud? The question hit him like a punch. For a moment, the old Alexander, the cold, the calculating one, tried to resurface, urging caution. But something inside him screamed differently. No, he replied firmly. This woman is the most honest person I have ever met. If there is a mistake, it is mine, for not having learned sooner what trust is. The cameras captured every word, every expression. The silence that followed was more eloquent than any justification. That night, social media was divided. Some mocked, others admired. But for the first time, Alexander didn't care about the world's opinion. He knew the truth, and he was willing to fight for it. The next day, Clara was summoned to the Foundation headquarters. She was pale, distressed, and teary-eyed. "Mr. Moore, you should remove me from the project. They're blaming me, and I don't want to tarnish it." He stood up immediately. "Clara, the project only exists because of you, and I won't allow them to destroy you." He gathered the entire team, journalists and staff, and called a hasty press conference. In front of the cameras, he went up on stage with Clara by his side. The flashes were incessant. He raised the microphone and said, "Before we begin, I want to make it clear. This woman is not being judged. She is being honored." The murmuring ceased. Alexander continued, "While many talk about philanthropy at gala dinners, she practices it every day, with the little she has. What happened here is not a scandal, it's a lesson. I, who live surrounded by wealth, learned about generosity from someone who never had anything, and yet gave everything." Clara, overcome with emotion, tried to hold back tears. Leah, in the middle of the audience, waved proudly to her mother. The scene touched everyone. Alexander placed his hand on Clara's shoulder and concluded, "Whoever wants to know what honesty is, should look at her. And whoever wants to know what change is, should look at me."
Applause echoed. The journalists, previously eager for negative headlines, were now recording a historic moment. The image of that powerful man, with tears in his eyes, embracing a humble woman, traveled the country. In the following days, the accusations fell apart. The envious manager was fired, and the truth prevailed. The project, Food Made with Love, gained international visibility. Donations began arriving from everywhere. Clara became a symbol of dignity, Alexander of redemption. Alone, later, he walked through the mansion and stopped in front of the mirror. He looked at his reflection and smiled. A genuine, light smile. Something he hadn't smiled in decades. "Finally, I've found the man I was meant to be," he murmured. He picked up the phone and called Clara. "The project is going to grow, but I need you for something more important." Confused, she asked, "What would that be, sir?" He replied, "I need you to teach me how to remain human." On the other end of the line, she laughed through tears. "That, Mr. Moore, is the only thing you ever are." At that moment, Alexander realized that his greatest achievement was not the fortune he had accumulated, but the capacity to feel and to be transformed by the love of someone he least expected. 2 months have passed since the scandal that became a symbol of compassion. The project, Food Made with Love, had expanded far beyond initial expectations. Community kitchens were opened in 5 cities, and companies began donating tons of food. But more than numbers, what was growing was something invisible: faith in people. Clara now coordinated a team of 30 employees and hundreds of volunteers. Alexander observed her in meetings and was impressed by the natural way she led. There were no grand speeches, only examples. When someone made a mistake, she taught them. When someone suffered, she listened. And in every action, he saw the kind of greatness that money could never give her. One afternoon, while visiting one of the new community kitchens, Alexander stood silently for several minutes, watching the mothers feeding their children. Leah helped distribute bread, smiling and chatting with the children. "She's just like her mother," Clara commented, moved. "She has such a big heart." Alexander nodded, a soft glint in his eyes. "She has what the world needs: purity." Those words tinged with admiration and tenderness, but also with regret for the years he had lived without seeing the value of simplicity. When the day ended, the volunteers gathered to give thanks. One of the women stood up and said, "Mr. Moore, you know you've become an inspiration to many people, don't you?" He smiled, shaking his head. "No, ma'am. The one who inspires is right beside me. I was just lucky enough to learn from her." Clara looked at him, surprised and touched.
That night, back at the mansion, Alexander walked through the corridors and felt something different. The walls, once cold, seemed warmed by good memories. The scent of flowers from the garden filled the air. He stopped in the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, and saw something unthinkable. Jars labeled with the names of the employees, food saved for them. He smiled. The old Alexander would never have allowed that. The new one not only allowed it, he insisted on it. "The house belongs to everyone now," he muttered. And in that simple gesture, he realized he was finally redeemed. Days later, a ceremony was scheduled. The founding Food Made with Love. It was to be officially inaugurated, with national coverage. Alexander insisted that Clara be the main spokesperson. She hesitated, but accepted, her heart pounding with nervousness and pride. On the eve of the event, he found her in the garden at sunset. "Are you ready?" he asked with a gentle smile. Clara replied, "I've never been so ready for something I never even dreamed of." He took her hands and said, "You didn't dream it, Clara. You made it happen." For a moment, they were silent. The sun was setting, and Leah was playing in the background, laughing loudly. Alexander looked at that scene and realized this was what he had always sought. Not power, not glory, but a place where love was greater than fear. The opening day dawned clear, with a sky of an almost symbolic blue. The hall was packed. Business people, volunteers, journalists, children and families benefiting from the project. On stage, a large sign displayed the name Food with Love, nourishing the body and the heart. Alexander watched from behind the stage as Clara prepared to speak. She trembled, but when she took the microphone and looked at the audience, she saw Leah smiling in the front row. That gave her courage. "A few months ago, I was working in the kitchen of a man who believed he had everything. Today, I am by his side, building something that nourishes lives, including his." The audience fell silent. Clara continued, "I learned that hunger isn't just for food. It's for affection, for time, for attention. And I discovered that even the hardest hearts can be transformed if someone has the courage to nourish their soul with love." Discreet tears streamed down Alexander's face. He never imagined hearing such simple yet powerful words about himself. As the audience began to applaud, Clara called him to the stage. "This is Alexander Moore, the man who learned that the greatest wealth is in sharing." He walked over to her, the applause echoing like a collective pardon. He took the microphone and, his voice trembling, said, "I've lived half my life trying to be respected. But it was when I decided to respect others that I learned the meaning of the word dignity." He turned to Clara and Leah. "These two taught me that love is food that never spoils, that the more you share it, the more it grows." Leah ran to him and hugged him. The audience stood up, moved. After the event, Alexander took Clara and Leah to a new home. Not a mansion, but a simple and welcoming residence built especially for them. "It's a gift, a home, not a payment," he said. Clara, crying, replied, "You have already given us the greatest home of all, a heart capable of feeling." That night, Leah drew the three of them together again. This time, she wrote underneath, "Family of Love." Alexander framed the drawing and hung it on his office wall. Every time he looked at it, he remembered the day he traded luxury for peace. And so, amidst laughter, hugs, and plans, the man who once had everything learned the greatest lesson of all, that true greatness lies in serving, and that sometimes those who nourish others are the ones most hungry for love. The auditorium was full. It was the founding's first anniversary. Food made with love, and dozens of families had been invited to celebrate the milestone. Colorful balloons, the smell of home-cooked food, and children's laughter filled the air. Alexander walked among the tables, greeting people, hugging volunteers, laughing, something that a year earlier would have been unthinkable. On stage, a huge banner read, "A year nourishing lives and hearts." Clara organized the guests with the calm of someone conducting an invisible orchestra, and Leah ran among the children distributing flowers. The scene was vibrant, human, full of love. Alexander observed everything with a light heart, feeling a different kind of pride, the kind that springs from humility, not ego. When it was her turn to speak, the audience fell silent. He stepped onto the stage, took a deep breath, and looked at everyone. A year ago, I thought hunger was only something the poor felt. Today I know that the worst hunger is the hunger for compassion, and I lived many years hungry. The words came out calmly, but they resonated deeply with everyone present. He continued, "I built hotels, companies, and mansions, but none of that fed me. It was only when I saw a mother sharing leftovers with her daughter that I understood what sharing is. And I realized that luxury can blind us, blind to what really matters, the other person." Clara, in the audience, was quietly crying. Leah, sitting next to her, waved enthusiastically. Alexander smiled and continued, "Today, this woman, whom I once treated as invisible, is the reason my life makes sense. And this girl with a smile worth more than gold taught me what gratitude is. They nourished me with what I needed most, humanity." A round of applause echoed, but Alexander raised his hand, asking for silence. "I don't want to be applauded. I want you to remember this. No dish is too small if it is served with love. No hand is too poor if it knows how to share. And no heart is so cold that it cannot be warmed by an act of kindness."
He stepped away from the microphone and called Clara and Leah to the stage. When the two went up, the audience gave him a standing ovation. Leah hugged him around the waist and whispered, "Uncle, now your smile isn't sad anymore." He laughed, moved, and replied, "That's because now it has a reason to exist." The event concluded with a large shared table. People from all walks of life sat side by side, business people, volunteers, mothers, children, all eating together, laughing, sharing stories. Alexander watched the scene and felt that, finally, he had found the home he had always sought. Later, when he got home, he went up to his office and looked at the picture with Leah's drawing, "Family of Love." He ran his fingers over the paper and murmured, "This is what we are now." Outside, the wind blew softly, carrying the distant sound of laughter. Before turning off the lights, he wrote a sentence in the diary he had kept since the beginning of the project. "I discovered that the richest man in the world is the one who has learned to feel." He smiled, closed his notebook, and turned off the light. For the first time, the darkness of the house didn't frighten him, because inside him there was finally light. See how a simple gesture can change an entire life. If this story touched your heart, imagine what's next. So sign up now and come experience it with us, one story at a time. Because here, what truly matters isn't the ending, it's what awakens within you.